Thanks for joining us in the MyCom podcast. Marketing your church matters, and we're here to help churches like yours find your audience and share your story with competence. I'm John Watson, and this is our Sherlock Holmes, otherwise known as Lauren's Glass. Thanks for joining us while Darby's out this week, Lawrence.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Today, we're going to have a conversation about video production for your church and why it shouldn't be scary and how to do it well. If you think it doesn't matter because your church doesn't use video, please just stick around. You might pick something up useful that you can use moving forward. Before we get to the topic, though, I want to say this. Marketing can seem pedantic, maybe even strangely secular sometimes in the church world. But if you have talents for marketing or communications or technology, this is a way for you to do the Lord's work. By which I mean this. God dignified human work from the beginning. In Genesis, he charged us with cultivating, subduing, civilizing. As the church, our work is to take the message of truth and grace into our communities and into the world. So we honor the Lord when we participate in the ministry of competence. So if we've got a carpenter in our church, our charge, our encouragement to him shouldn't just be, hey, don't drink too much, don't be lazy. We should be encouraging him to build excellent tables. And as marketers and communicators, our charge is to communicate effectively and clearly. So that ministry of competence is a way that we can do the Lord's work in the Lord's way and honor him through marketing, through advertising, through video production. So now that I've got that off my chest, let's talk about how we can use video in our churches to get our message out with excellence.
So I'm so glad you said that, because I have always considered that communication skills were a gift.
Yeah.
And that I think my personal mission statement has always been, I want to use my skills to communicate a good message. Mm-hmm. And I really do think that I went into television because I was influenced by PBS and educational programming. Yeah. And the impact it had on me watching a miniseries on Leonardo da Vinci, I'll never forget it. I was just set on fire. Really? Now, again, I'm a reader, I'm a writer. That's my real first love. Yeah. But I was so drawn into his life, seeing it and seeing the emotion on the actor's face and seeing the images and hearing what he said, that I said, I'm going into television for that reason. So I think that we, as you said, it's a very good point. Marketing can sound commercial or even self-serving or not, giving. And actually, it's a skill to be able to promote a good message.
Absolutely. I mean, even Paul employed the techniques of persuasion. He simplified his message, but he made it as persuasive as he possibly could so that when he said, by all means, I might save some. So if we've got the message of truth and grace for the world, if this actually matters, then we should be persuasive. We should pull out ads on Facebook. We should employ all of the tools in our arsenal as marketers for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned TV. This is not your first rodeo. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So I did want to go into television at a very early age, and I spent about 20 years in television production. So I was very, very blessed to work for some local network affiliates here. I worked mostly on talk shows and information shows, and I worked around entertainment. Of course, I was in Nashville, Tennessee, so I definitely worked with country music. So I have worked with a lot of the larger names of country music. I was very blessed to work for the Dick Clark Company. Wow. So I say all that to say, after all that experience and after working with, professionals and working with larger budgets and crews, one big takeaway for me is that it's content.
Yeah.
And content in your own church, you do not have to have a crew and money and a lot of training to know good content and to be able to video good content. And I want people to know that. I want them to know with a cell phone. I'm not talking about you're going to need to hire this and you're going to hire that. I want people to know that the content in their church can be captured on a cell phone. And with a few pointers that I hope I can give, you can just make that is better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when reading the text of Scripture, context is king. You've probably heard that. Mm-hmm. But when you're communicating your church's message, content is king, right? And everything about what you do from the pulpit, from the stage of your church, if it's not ruled by content, right, then it's ruled by production. And that's shallow. But good production enables you to hear good content without barriers, you know? So if you
We need to write that down. That's good.
hold on. If you've got really good lighting on your stage, you might even use some like purple tones and whatever. But if you've got a really weak message and the pastor's
Right.
up there, but he's really well lit, and you're like shining the light on him and helping him just pop out so that he draws your attention, and he says nothing worth hearing.
Right.
Right. But if he's got a killer message, good lighting is going to help you. It's going to help draw your attention in and tune you to hear what he has to say. Well, and I guess it's a good segue because lighting is something we're certainly going to talk about here.
And I think that point brings something to mind that we just had here at United Methodist Communications. One of our reporters, Sam Hodges, went to cover a small church in Georgia, about 25 people, and they had two older gentlemen, get up and sing a cappella gospel. And so Sam, who's a writer, he just grabbed his cell phone. He had already been given permission to go down close to them. So he took his cell phone and he walked up close enough that he got very, very good audio. So he was able to capture these two gentlemen who were not going to always be around,
Right.
do this a cappella gospel. It was incredible. I mean, as we were saying, it just sort of rocked.
Yeah.
But he got up close and captured this. And it's interesting. He took a picture of them, which is very charming. But hearing that audio and seeing them sing was really something else. And I guess that's sort of what, I want to say about video is that there are times when taking a picture is awesome, but think about maybe trying to do video. And one of the things that we had talked about earlier was special events in your church.
Yeah.
And Vacation Bible School might be one, or a fundraiser. There was a fundraiser at my church where they had children and puppies, and they were raising money for a humane association and to buy the training of a service dog. And it was such a great opportunity to get video and see people being happy and ministering in a different way in young people. And one of the great things about that is that video does get shared a lot, and even in a genuine way. And it can be shared, some of the volunteers were not church members, they're from the community. So when they have a video like that, they have this record, they can share it, and it can get shared way beyond just your church community. There's a lot of value for your church members to see it, obviously, but it's great if somebody else sees it who doesn't know about your church.
Oh, absolutely. Video is more likely to be shared on social media than pretty much anything else.
Right.
Maybe second only to memes. Maybe we'll do another podcast on memes. That's a different game for a different day. But so that brings me to an interesting idea that, here on this podcast, when we are preparing for a new episode, I'm always asking the question, why do this as a podcast rather than a MyCom article? What about this topic or the way that we're going to approach the topic is conducive to the medium of audio over and above the medium of text? And in the same way, I think that you should bring something like that framework when you think about putting new content out there. Would it be a good article? Would it be a good podcast? Would it be a good video? If you've got a flourishing Facebook page for your church and you want to post and say, hey, 7 o'clock tonight, we're doing Bible study at the church. It's a potluck. Bring your favorite side dish. That might be a very useless video, right? Like if you grab your cell phone and you record a video of you saying that, it's not really shareable, right? Okay, I might be coming down hard on it. It might not be useless, but I'm saying that there are more personal, better ways to use video. And there are some things that you can communicate in one sentence that makes really good written text. That's just informational, informative, and helpful. But one of the ways that I've seen pastors use video in a way that I think comes off way better than in writing. A lot of pastors keep a blog. Probably nobody reads it. Right? I've experienced that. Like you put all of this effort, you're studying, you're in the Word, you're reading theology.
It's deathless prose.
Yeah, exactly. Like you end up writing this thesis and you put it out there and you're really proud, and then you reference it at church a couple weeks later and no one had read it.
Yeah.
You're right. But I've seen a pastor pick up a cell phone and hold it steady and say what's on his heart that week to his congregation and put it on Facebook. And the engagement will go through the roof. They're pastors on social media. Like it's a very charming, very disarming, personal way to engage with somebody. That's one way that the medium lends itself well to. You mentioned, VBS and fundraisers and things like that. Fundraising is an interesting thing because we see we get so much written content all the time and things in the mail and on Facebook and all of that it can just seem like one more thing. And so if you can get a personal video where you're giving your burden for this, you can connect. I think 90% of our communication is through body language. So if you can communicate that through your body language, your facial expressions, your eyes, and your words, and if the video, like we said, removes those barriers with good production to help you hear and see that message clearly, you can really make an impact with your audience for that cause that you're working toward.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that video does is that you really do get a sense of how genuine someone is.
Yeah.
You can read something moving, and you can read something that you're thinking, are they coming across as know-it-all, or are they being...
That's why I don't get on video.
No. But you really do. We all sort of know when we're watching someone speak how genuine they are. And that helps. Maybe you don't 100% agree with a message, or you aren't as open to that message. When you see how genuine someone is, it makes such a big difference in letting down your own guard and just listening. And that's why I think being able to have your pastor give some messages on video would be a great idea. And another one would be, there are people in your church, whether your church is 5 years old or 100 years old, who have history and experience and stories that no one else has.
Yeah.
I mean, I have people who've gone to my church for 50, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And to be able to maybe sit down with some of them and interview them on video would be a great way to preserve some of your history, a great way to preserve the memories of them when they're no longer with us, and just a great way to show how unique your church is. These stories that make you unique, and a shared heritage that, could be shared with your church community and outside. So
Absolutely.
It's a great way to show how personable people can be. One of the things that you mentioned that I jumped from lighting to sound because I had that great memory of those two gentlemen singing. Yeah. You really can take just a few moments to think about what you're seeing and hearing and make a big difference. So I always say video, think about what you're seeing and hearing. And that sort of sounds crazy. It's like, well, of course, it's video. But I do that anytime I do any video, period, even if it's my cat at home, because the content is king. The content is more important than production. People will forgive a lot of production for the content. And again, I've seen, as you said, I've seen things with incredible production value, and I'm counting up the dollars in my head, but the message didn't move me.
Yeah, right.
So there are just a couple of things you can do if you think about what you're seeing and what you're hearing when you videotape. And so with lighting, whether you're taking pictures or video, if you will simply think about where the light source is. Yeah. You don't have to have extra lighting. That would be great if you've got it. You don't have to have it. Just think about, and this is one thing I see a lot, do you have a lot of bright light or windows behind your subject's head? That can make their face darker. Can you just turn them around? And there are many times I see video and I think if they had just moved them a little bit, they're in the dark. If they had just moved them a little bit, the light would be on them. So if you just think about your lighting, where it's coming from, it may be moving someone around half a circle and you're in a better light.
Just avoiding a silhouette, just a little shift can help.
Right.
Even interesting lighting can be good. It doesn't mean that it has to be a full, perfectly lit from all angles sort of thing. That you can have a great light on half of the face and have a really interesting shot that highlights character.
But just to think about, before you videotape, think about, say a pastor's going to give a talk. Say you're going to interview maybe somebody at Vacation Bible School. When they're sitting down at that desk or when that child is there in front of the activity, just take a moment to look behind them. What are you seeing behind the pastor? Is there a plant coming right out of the back of their head? Is the activity behind the child so exciting and fun and they're jumping into water that it will take away from what the child's saying?
Because we see in 3 dimensions when we're in person, right? So I'm looking at you, and behind you is a curtain, and behind that is a drum set in the studio, and there are all these things.
And people are walking back and forth.
Right, there's activity, but because of that dimensionality, my focus is on you and
Yes.
everything else is out of focus. But on video, that doesn't come across in the same way,
Yes.
especially the lower down the spectrum on production equipment you go.
Yes.
If we're talking about video with an iPhone, you need to be really aware that you're going to get a 2D image out of this, that what's behind the person directly is going to be as in focus as the person for the most part. So you get plants coming out of the top of people's heads and all sorts of things that you wouldn't notice in person without looking for it.
Right. So it's a matter of just taking a moment. If you know you're going to interview someone, an older person, you know that the pastor would like to speak, taking a moment thinking about where you're going to do this and looking at it, just putting your cell phone there and looking at that shot and think, oh, this line of windows might be too bright. If I turn them this way, there's a beautiful painting that has history and meaning to us and books. And maybe if there's a great activity in your parish hall and then it's a pancake supper and there's a lot of noise and activity, maybe just move the person to the other end of the room, turn them slightly so that maybe you don't have so much activity.
Yep.
You may want the activity in the background, but just think about what you're seeing and hearing.
You got to approach every time you stage a shot, it has to be done with intentionality, right? Unless it's a completely different sort of a thing where I've seen this, the pastor will post a video of them driving in their car.
Right.
Right. And they do a selfie video and it's super casual.
Right.
And he's like, hey, I just saw this bumper sticker and that made me think of this thing. And it's this short 1 minute engaging thing. That's fine. There's a place for that. But I think what we're getting to is we're not shooting for production quality that when the video ends makes the congregation go, did you notice how good the production was on that? You want them to not notice the production at all.
Right.
It needs to be a lens that you look through, not a screen that you look at. And so they should be seeing through, not even noticing the production quality. That's the real goal, is to be completely undistracting and remove those barriers.
And one of the things you'll notice is when someone is completely in the dark or when you really just can't hear their audio, that's when you notice it.
Yes, exactly.
So if you just think of those two things, and one very simple thing to do with your camera, because a lot of times, a lot of people don't have a video camera. If you do, that's awesome. That's a step ahead. Your mic may be more directional. But if you are working with a cell phone, just take a moment to find out where the best audio is, and that's probably going to be closer. So we did a little test. We were going to get some video, and we only had the cell phone. And we had someone just speak and answer some questions for us. And we backed up 3 or 4 feet, and the mic was very directional, and the audio was very, very good. And we backed up like 6 or 7. And the room tone that then came in and the background noise that then came in was dramatic. So we sort of figured, oh, okay.
There's a sweet spot there.
There's a sweet spot there for what we call a talking head.
Yeah.
Someone just talking to camera, an interview or someone giving a message. Now, if you are just taking a big, nice, sweeping shot of a water game at Vacation Bible School or lots of activity or even coloring, you're not as concerned about that audio.
Yeah.
And so just some room noise and audio, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm thinking more if you want to hear someone speaking, to just sort of find that out. And one other tip, when I began in my career, the shot had to be actually steady. And if the shot moved at all, we were considered very unprofessional. All of a sudden, MTV broke that, and the shots became very moving, and then shots kind of shake, and so now, and it's funny, I've hired people to do this, and I'm like, can you give me just a little bit of that shaky cam? And these are guys that are very skilled, and ironically, it takes a very steady hand to add just a little bit of movement to a camera and have it look good.
I believe that.
So I kind of recommend maybe being able to make your phone stationary if you can. There are a few attachments you can get a very small tripod for, like an iPhone or a camera, that will sit on a desk, and some that will even hook to a stand or wrap onto something. If you can just sort of frame your shot and lock it down, if you're interviewing someone or talking to them, it's going to free you up. You can still look if you need to, but if you can isolate that shot and make it steady, it's just going to make it the production value a lot, because you won't focus on the movement of the shot. You will focus more on them.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually kind of brings me to another point that is one of my pet peeves, really. I love symmetry. I think symmetry is beautiful. And when you have, especially with the talking head shots, right, where it's a person communicating a message, for heaven's sake, please frame the shot. Please look at it, right, and say, the bookshelf behind the desk it's at a weird angle. The perspective is strange so that it's getting bigger on one side and smaller, and the lines aren't horizontal. They're down 10 degrees. Like, just take a second, and it really just takes a second to put the camera in a place that you're just looking straight on, right? You've got parallel lines going horizontal, and that's going to do so much to look undistractingly professional. And the other thing is, if you don't have a tripod and you're using a phone, right? What most people tend to do is prop their phone up on something. And that's fine, but let me just caution you, if you prop your phone up and lean it back so that it doesn't fall over, you're getting a shot that's tilted upward. Nobody looks good at that angle.
No. Let's say that again.
Yeah, nobody looks good from the bottom up, okay? No. It's funny, my son at church, there are 2 or 3 guys that have dark hair and dark beards, about the same height, and tend to wear plaid, you know the type. And my son, he's 4, he gets all of them confused with each other. And I realized one day it's because all he sees is beard. He sees a plaid shirt and beard from that angle. They all look the same because all you see is a hairy chin, right? But it's not a flattering angle. And so if you must prop your phone up in a way, what I like to do is I'll take like a heavy book and I'll put it in front of my phone and one behind so that it pinches it into an upright, perpendicular to the surface angle. And then just make sure it's high enough at that point that you're not pointing at somebody's belly button. Of course, you want to get it kind of at head level at that point, or chin or neck level, so that as the shot broadens with distance. But that'll go a long way to centering your attention, drawing your attention even with the lines of the shot into the person who's giving the content.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think to think about what you're seeing and think about what you're hearing are 2 of the most important things. A lot of times when I've gone out to look at our set, as we call it, which could be on location or anywhere it is, I'm always thinking about, am I right beside a very loud machine, an air conditioning unit?
Right.
You become more and more attuned to it, which is kind of nice. So as you do video, as you attempt to do video, I always say, give yourself permission to learn and grow. I made all of my mistakes in live television because I worked for a live talk show here locally, magazine show. And so most of the things that I learned were basically messing up on live camera with the director saying, you're in the shot, please back up, you just dropped the script, the teleprompter's off, you know. So I guess I encourage people to not feel like they have to be professional to do this. I would encourage people to even maybe interview someone at home for practice. You know, practice makes perfect. Interview your spouse or interview someone at home to practice and give yourself permission to learn and grow. Every time I've ever done production, and I've done it for 25 years, I learn something every time. Every time I think, oh, now I know to do this, you know. Yeah. One of my favorite stories was I was working with a professional photographer and videographer, and I said, can we shoot this way and get this shot, and it would be great, and I walked through, and he said, no. And I said, why? He was a very agreeable guy. He goes, why? And I said, because you're having me shoot into a mirror. Now, you know, I had done it for 10 years, and I just quite didn't notice there was a mirror there. And he said, you're going to see that person, and you're going to see me with a camera and a tripod and a headset. So all I'm saying is that just try it, and you'll learn something, and that's really exciting to me. I mean, it's really exciting to me. You start learning more and more of what you want out of it. And maybe when you interview someone, you want to talk to them ahead of time and make a few points to ask them, and you learn more about listening to what they're saying.
Yes.
So it's really exciting, and I guess that's why when I talk about it, I don't want people to be scared about making video. I just want them to know that if your heart is in the right place, you're going to come out with something great, and every time you do it, you're going to get better with your production. So,
and really what helps us as an audience, as viewers and hearers, is what helps us connect is comfort. If you're comfortable, if you're imperfect and comfortable, you're more fun to watch than if you're perfect and uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right? You know, it reminds me of my wife used to try to get me to run. I really only run when I'm being chased. And so it was not my favorite thing to do. And we'd hit a couple miles, and I'd be like, I'm dying, I got to stop. And she's like, you have to be comfortable with the discomfort. You have to learn how to rest in the discomfort and own that and move on. And if it's always going to be awkward because you're always going to be learning new things. I mean, like you said, after 25 years, you're still learning new things every time. And so you're not going to always be perfectly prepared. You're just not. You're not going to always be able to anticipate the response of your interviewer or your interviewee. That's fun. It can be fun if you just relax and get comfortable with the discomfort. And discomfort's too negative of a word to put on it, because really the unknown can be exciting, but it's just a frame of mind.
Well, and I would love to say this. I'm so glad you said that because being uncomfortable means you're growing.
Yes.
And that's a good thing. Again, being uncomfortable on camera, if you see someone uncomfortable and nervous, you can feel it as a human being. But wonderful thing about videotape as opposed to live, which I've worked in live too, the wonderful thing about videotape for you to know as a producer, if you're going to be on camera, you're going to interview someone, is that you can start again.
Yeah.
You can do the answer again.
Yep.
You can try it again. You're on tape and you're in control of that. And I have worked with even professionals that I won't name who get nervous when they're interviewed. Yeah. They can get up and sing like you would not believe, but they're very nervous about talking about themselves. And I have learned to help a subject if you're talking to someone, or say someone's going to deliver a message for you. They want to deliver the message and it's not your pastor who's used to speaking. Yeah. I've learned to just let them know, hey, this is on tape. Don't worry, we can do it again.
Right.
And that takes the pressure off. And then if I'm going to ask, I usually ask them a couple of very easy questions up front, like, okay, give me your name and spell it. And I say, don't worry about the camera. It lets them calm down. Now, we're in an age where people are everyone has a camera, everybody's taping all the time, and people are pretty used to it.
Yeah.
But when you feel like you're a spokesperson or you're answering questions, you do feel a little more pushed to be perfect. And so I like to let people know we can do it again. We can take another answer. You can rephrase it. And that's really helpful. And that does bring up editing, which you don't have to do editing. You can do some editing in your camera and your phone.
Yeah.
But you may find out that there's a younger person in your congregation who has iMovie, who has Final Cut, who does editing, and would like to do something like that. You might be able, you might have iMovie on your computer. So that would be, to me, the next step to think about is to try to do a little editing. You may find out you really enjoy it. And again, I think I'm hearing pastors that I know going, I don't have time to do this. I totally understand. But you may have someone else on your staff or in your congregation who would love to try to do some editing. So
even to build up their resume or portfolio with that if they're fresh out of college.
Exactly. And so you may not have time to do that, but someone else may enjoy or have the program where they could take that and maybe just take a little bit of the space and pause out. So if you've interviewed someone or if you've done a message and you've started it again, and they can just take the good portions of it. Being able to edit a little bit can add a lot to it. And one really important thing, if you're going to be able to go to that next level of production, sort of the next level of production, to do a little bit of editing is to think about what we call B-roll. And that just simply means the additional, more visual footage. So we call the A-roll, say, the main event, the person talking, the interview person, the pastor speaking, maybe the main event that's happening at a fundraiser, at Vacation Bible School, or Pancake Supper. But you may want to get a close-up of the pancake, a close-up of what the pastor's talking about. Mm-hmm. That may not be applicable if they're talking about something that's more metaphorical or philosophical. But if you are talking about your stained glass windows that you have in your church, if you're talking about a children's choir, if you can get some footage of that you can layer over your what we call main audio, that really enhances it, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that the narration of the shot, whoever's talking, giving the content,
of your story,
the story continues, the audio continues, but you might cut for 2 seconds or 3 seconds and show some B-roll footage of the puppies playing with the kids while the person is talking about the fundraiser. Yeah.
It's just sort of the next level. And I had talked to a man one time who wanted a little bit of advice, and they were doing sort of some neat 3 or 4 or 5 minute walking tours of some shops. And the on-camera person was quite good. He was doing it on his phone or a small camera. And so they would walk in and talk about what they had, and they would walk you over here and show you this. And it was just a little visual tour. And I said, the one thing you could do is you're framing her nicely, and she's describing the jewelry. She's describing this. Could you then go back after you do that main part and take some close-ups of what she just talked about? Mm-hmm. So if you've talked to a couple of people at an event or Vacation Bible School, just continue to go around and take some shots of what's actually happening. And when you layer it that way, it just gives so much more production value.
Exactly. And good B-roll spotlights the content better. It complements it, right? If the content is the woman's message about her jewelry, about the jewelry in the collection, highlighting the intricacy and beauty of one of the pieces isn't distracting. It's complementary to the main message overall.
And really quite easy to do.
Yeah.
And you just want to think about, getting like a wide establishing shot that shows where you are. Maybe a shot of the outside of the store or a sign. Signs are always a nice thing to get a shot of because they establish where you are and they brand your church name. Establishing shots are nice, so you sort of feel a sense of place. And then close-ups, like you say, getting some close-ups of what someone is talking about or just the interaction. It's also a good way to kind of double up without lengthening the time. So if you have children having a great time doing something or a choir singing and you have these shots that you can layer over choir directors saying, we have such a great time here, you really need to come join our choir, it just sort of gets more information in.
Yeah, for sure. What we're really trying to do here is say you can do it, right?
Yes.
Like, small church in the county, you got this.
Right.
You've got a smartphone. You'll be okay. There are just some simple rules that will help you create a focus on the message and minimize distraction. And it can be a really, really useful tool in your toolbox in communicating with your congregation and with your community as you throw videos up, maybe a church tour on your website, as you post on social media.
A pet blessing.
A pet blessing. There's a lot that you can do with it. And bringing humor in to your social media platform can be a really helpful way to let people know that you're not all fire and brimstone, that you're humans and that there are things to laugh about. And that, that's such an important message for the church to say. It's so important for us to be saying that.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people do go to a church for companionships in some way, not to diminish that they are going for a spiritual reason. But I hear people tell me that it was a place, maybe they felt lonely.
Right. They want a connection.
They want connection. Maybe they are not around their family. That's why I went to the church I did when I was in college. I missed that family connection.
Yeah.
The choir became my family. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are just diving into the world of video or thinking about diving into the world of video, you've got homework this week. If you've got a screen, if you use a projection in your church, try doing the announcements with a video. Just give it a shot for 1 week. You can even, beginning of the service, let them know we're going to do something new this week. I hope it's helpful for you. And just do a 2-minute video of, one of your deacons or whomever doing the announcements. And that's a great place to bring in a little bit of laughter, and you can be a little bit silly with it. And because of the nature of video being so, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a thing my child gets when he sits in front of the TV constantly. Stimulating. It's so stimulating that it can really hold attention better than if somebody between songs walks up to the front and reads off of a bulletin. So give it a shot and shoot us an email at podcast@umcom.org and let us know how it went. And let us know if you're going to do it again. And if you come up with any tips like, hey, this was really helpful, or wow, we tried this and it was really awful, we want to hear it all. And we'd love for you to be a part of the conversation in that way.
There's one thing I would like to add, which probably doesn't register as much with a church as it does with some of the commercial ventures that I did. But if you were having a community event, one of the things that we always did was just to post a sign that said, we're going to be videotaping our event. I don't feel like you have to get releases from people. Video is so prevalent now.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if you see someone people are videotaping with their camera all the time. If you don't want to be on camera, people just tend to get out of the way or say no, which is anyone would honor. But if you want to feel just that you're letting people know that's one thing that you can do is just to put a sign up saying we're videotaping this event.
Yeah, I'm glad you
to let people know that you are doing that. And again, and also you wouldn't, but we would never post children's names on videos, just the maybe the grade of the school if you wanted, or the teacher's name if you're talking to them, but we would never put children's names up. So.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And especially when kids are involved, it's a great way to honor the parents to just, let's say you're doing a thing for VBS, to let all the parents know. We just want to grab a kind of a scan shot of the room during an activity. Here's where we're going to put it. Here's how public it's going to be. Are you okay with this? If not, we can just grab your kid out of the shot real quick,
right,
and just make sure that they're not in it. Because, I mean, if you're not respecting and honoring the people in the shots and their parents and all of that, then that's just not a good way to go. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We're obviously not going to give you legal advice. If that's something that your church has rules on already, like if they've defined this is how we handle that, by all means, ask around. Like, one of your deacons might know that, one of the administrators. Ask and see if those things are in place. And if not, that'd be a great place to come along and kind of add some documents, some guidelines, and help the next people who work at your church know how to do that as well.
And what I found was that most parents, when I have worked in schools, they were completely fine with having children be on video. They just didn't want the name.
Yep,
and they just wanted to
exactly.
be assured that we would not have any names, especially last names. Even when I interviewed children, I might use a first name with permission, but you don't even have to do that.
Right.
That was really all they needed to know, was just that I'm not going to put names out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we got to wrap up. Do you have one favorite tip for doing video?
Be spontaneous. Go with the flow of what is happening. I learned a long time ago. I'm a very plan A person, and sort of like I have to have control. And television really healed that in me, because in television you go from A to B to C. You move right on down. Yeah. Have a plan, but be flexible, because plan B or plan C may be, what that child says, you're thinking you're getting one answer, you get another. And I've had that happen over and over again, can be so much more wonderful than what you ever expected. Yes. So be spontaneous and creative. That's good. Enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think mine has to be, those car lot commercials that you see on local television.
I have done those car lot commercials.
Oh, Lord. Well, I'm sorry if I offend you with what I'm about to say.
No,
those can be
okay.
some of the worst commercials that you'll ever see. And here, I think this is the reason why. I don't know that I've ever seen one where the camera's not really far away from the person and the guy's not shouting to be heard. This is Jerry with Jerry's Car Lot. Come on down. We got the best special. Please don't do that. Please talk normal and make sure the camera's close enough that you can hear at a normal voice. No one wants to be yelled at, right?
You do know that part of that is because they enjoy talking at that pitch level.
That's true. There is something fun about that sometimes. Anyway, well, I'm glad that you guys tuned in, and Lawrence, it was awesome having you in the studio today.
It was awesome to be here. It's always good to talk with you.
Yeah, and if you think this is going to be helpful for anybody else in your church, we encourage you to share that around. And again, we want you to be a part of the conversation. So shoot us an email, podcast@umcom.org, and make sure that if you haven't, you sign up for the MyCom newsletter as well. Every couple of weeks, you're going to get some really helpful articles in your inbox that are geared for what you do. So don't miss that. And we'll see you next time.